So, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this Pinniped monitoring training program. My name is Lisa Bader. I'm the program director for Stewards of the Coast and Redwoods. And Stewards of the Coast and Redwoods is a nonprofit organization located in Sonoma County, California. We work in partnership with California State Parks in the Russian River District to support volunteer education and stewardship programs. Our mission is to protect the natural and cultural resources of Armstrong Redwoods State Natural Reserve, Austin Creek State Recreation Area, and Sonoma Coast State Park through volunteerism, environmental education, and stewardship for generations to come. We also, this pinniped monitoring is actually a really important one of our collaborative efforts with Sonoma Water. And the Pinniped program itself has a vision, mission, and purpose, which I'm just going to outline real briefly here. Um, so the vision of this program is to monitor the area of the Russian River mouth for all species of concern, including but not limited to marine mammals, threatened and endangered salmonids, bird life, and other aquatic species so they'll thrive together in the Russian River Estuary. The mission is to collect and provide data that will be used by the National Marine Fisheries Service to ensure that pinnipeds are safeguarded under the Marine Mammal Protection Act at the mouth of the Russian River. And the purpose, the big picture is that by monitoring the pinnipeds, that we're aiming to determine whether or not the modification of the Russian River Estuary will impact the Jenner Pinniped colony. Basically, we're looking at the overall health of the pinniped population and collecting data so that if and when a mechanical breach of the river is needed, then we have data to understand the impacts of that. Does anyone want to add anything, Justin or Andy, to that? Okay, great. Well, I am going to hand it over to our partners at Sonoma Water, Jessica and Andy. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. So I'm Jessica Martini Lamb, Environmental Resources Manager at Sonoma Water, also the project manager for the Russian River Estuary project. I'm going to give you a presentation briefly presenting the sort of background on the Estuary Management Project and the Marine Mammal Protection Act. And I will share my screen. Start the slideshow. And hopefully you only see a single screen, correct? Okay, thank you for the thumbs up. Okay, so as I mentioned, I'll present on the Russian River Estuary Management Project and the Marine Mammal Protection Act. So a little bit about the Russian River Estuary. So the estuary is where the Russian River meets the Pacific Ocean, and the tidal extent of the estuary is from the mouth of the Russian River upstream approximately 11 kilometers or river miles to the confluence with the tributary Austin Creek. And so this is an area that's highly dynamic. It's when the river mouth is open, it's under the influence of the daily tides, as well as the flows from the river coming in from upstream. So when we talk about the Russian River Estuary, we kind of often describe it in its different reaches, and these reaches are really defined by the amount of tidal influence and sort of mixing of the tidal and river tidal saline waters and the fresh water from the Russian River. So we talk about it as the lower reach from the river mouth up to about the upstream extent of Penny Island. That tends to be pretty saline, more marine type water quality conditions. And then the middle reach is from the upper upstream end of Penny Island up to about Sheep House Creek, where water in the estuary tends to be more brackish, so higher salinities, but not as saline as the marine water quality. And then the upper reach, excuse me, from Sheep House Creek up to Austin Creek, that tends to be a predominantly freshwater environment when the river mouth is open. Um, but the river mouth actually is subject to closures during certain times of the year. It can close any time of the year, but predominantly we see closures occur in the spring and again in the fall and sometimes winter months. And that's primarily because those are the times of year where we see ocean swell conditions that have long enough periods with enough strength behind them to move offshore sand that's been deposited back onshore and close the river mouth and create what we call a barrier beach. Um, when that happens, the barrier beach closes and the estuary essentially becomes a lagoon. And the river inflows continue to flow into the lagoon. And periodically, we'll also see ocean waves big enough to where they are breaking over the beach and contributing um, ocean water into the lagoon. And water elevations will start to rise in the lagoon and threaten to flood low-lying properties. At that time, the backwatering of the lagoon condition actually extends all the way up to Vacation Beach. So it really changes the potential for flood risk as the longer it stays closed. Um, and back in the mid 1990s, so prior to the mid 1990s, the estuary beach management activities were done by private citizens or the county of Sonoma. In the mid 1990s, there was reorganization and so these management for flooding risk responsibilities came to Sonoma Water. And so soon after those flood risk management responsibilities came to Sonoma Water, the three salmonid species in the Russian River watershed were listed under the Federal Endangered Species Act. Um, so those are Chinook salmon, coho salmon, and steelhead. Coho salmon are also listed as threatened under the California Endangered Species Act, so the state Endangered Species Act as well. Um, so around that time, we really started looking at the potential for beach management activities um, to minimize flood risk to impact the salmonid species. And what the beach management activities are predominantly they've always been an artificial breach, which you see in sort of the center slide here where when the river mouth closes between the concrete jetty groin and the beach to the north, the inlet migrates back and forth there. It'll close in that area. And the river mouth will artificially be breached with heavy equipment. Usually it's an excavator that'll be taken out onto the beach and create what we call a pilot channel. Basically create a channel, a shallow channel in the sand. They sidecast the sand onto the beach and allows the river mouth to basically scour out on its own. Um, and that will allow the river mouth to open, reduce the potential for flood risk by dropping the water surface elevations in the lagoon and return estuary conditions to the estuary. The concern about that for the listed salmonid species is that steelhead in particular, and also occasionally coho salmon, will utilize the Russian River Estuary as rearing habitat when they're juveniles. So they'll make their way from um, the upper parts of the watershed and they will migrate out of the river through the estuary Steelhead predominantly will use the estuary to grow and rear over the summer months and into the early fall. Coho salmon will spend a limited time rearing in the estuary, but will also migrate through on their way out. And Chinook will also migrate out, but they spend very little time in the estuary itself. So there was a real concern about how those breaching activities might affect the potential for that rearing habitat to be um, enhanced in the estuary when the river mouth closes and those lagoon conditions form. It's a good habitat for them. They like mostly freshwater conditions. Um, and so the lagoon setting up after a closure and then vacating those more freshwater layers that set up in the lagoon um, post breaching activity was the concern for impacts to steelhead. And in 2008, Sonoma Water and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers received what's called the Russian River Biological Opinion. Basically, National Marine Fisheries Service's assessment of operations within the Russian River watershed, including these beach management activities and their potential to affect um, the listed salmonid species. And out of that plan, uh, Sonoma Water was asked to modify our beach management activities to enhance habitat for juvenile steelhead that would be rearing in the estuary in the summertime. And the way that the biological opinion sort of prescribed that change was to, during the summer months from mid-May to mid-October, to instead of just creating the pilot channel and artificially breaching the estuary, trying to promote um, those lagoon conditions that provide rearing habitat for steelhead for a longer period in those months by creating an outlet channel. So once the estuary closes and becomes a lagoon, trying to facilitate a, a higher water surface elevation in the estuary that would allow for more of that freshwater layer that sets up for rearing habitat to last longer, but still allow for river discharge through an outlet channel. So the biological opinion also prescribed monitoring to look at and help answer some questions about how salmonids and steelhead in particular utilize the Russian River estuary. So since 2003 for fisheries and 2008 for invertebrates, we also started doing some pretty extensive biological monitoring, doing seining for salmonids and other fish in the estuary, operating what we call downstream migrant traps to understand better the timing of entry into the estuary by juvenile salmonids. We did an extensive prey invertebrate study of all the invertebrates that occur in the Russian River estuary and an evaluation of the invertebrates that are the predominant prey items for juvenile steelhead in the estuary. We completed that work in 2019. We also um, extended the pinniped monitoring program. We had previously done pinniped monitoring in the late 1990s and started that program again along with the stewards. We also continue to do extensive water quality monitoring in the estuary and studies evaluating physical processes in the estuary. So all of these monitoring activities require Sonoma Water staff and consultants to actually be out in the field, and we're working in the vicinity of the harbor seals that we see at the Goat Rock State Beach. And the Federal Marine Mammal Protection Act is sort of the federal law that we strive to comply with to make sure both our management actions associated with the estuary management program and all of our monitoring activities are done in compliance with the Act. And the Marine Mammal Protection Act prohibits taking marine mammals unless they're specifically exempted or authorized under a permit from the National Marine Fisheries Service. And it authorizes what's called incidental taking that occurs under otherwise lawful activities. So under the Act, under the Marine Mammal Protection Act, take and harassment has very specific definitions. So take means to harass, hunt, capture, or kill, or attempt to do any of these things. And harassment is any act that pursuit or torment or annoyance, which has the potential to either injure or disturb the marine mammals by causing disruption of their behavioral patterns. So harassment by injury is considered a level A type of harassment, and disturbance is considered a level B. So permits that are issued under the Marine Mammal Protection Act describe the permissible methods of take and require what's called the least practicable adverse impact on the species and their habitat. So essentially requires mitigation measures to ensure that the impacts are avoided and minimized. And the permits also include monitoring and reporting requirements. So Sonoma Water holds what's called a letter of authorization. So it's a multiple year permit under the Marine Mammal Protection Act that's been issued by National Marine Fisheries Service. And this letter of authorization covers what is defined as level B harassment of harbor seals, California sea lions, and elephant seals that might occur from the Russian River Estuary management activities. And the permit includes minimization measures and monitoring and reporting. So the activities that are covered in the permit include our artificial breaching activities. So those activities that we undertake on Goat Rock State Beach to open up the river mouth again once it's closed to minimize flood risk, to implement outlet channel management as required by the biological opinion, and then all of the monitoring activities that we do in the vicinity of any of the marine mammals that might occur in the estuary. So that includes any measurements that we might be taking on the beach associated with our breaching activities. We do monthly beach topographic surveys that are required under the biological opinion. Those are included. And then all of our biological and water quality monitoring activities, whether they occur on the beach or by boat or other means in the estuary itself. So I'm going to stop there and just see if there are any questions about the Estuary Management Program or the Marine Mammal Protection Act before I move on to the Pinniped Monitoring Program. Okay, I don't see any questions, so I'm going to move on. Just lost my slide deck. There we go. Okay, so the pinniped monitoring that Sonoma Water and the Stewards of the Coast and Redwoods implement is outlined in a jointly prepared document called the Russian River Estuary Management Project Pinniped Monitoring Plan. It was last revised in August of 2021, and the Pinniped Monitoring Program identifies the monitoring methods and goals and objectives of our studies. So the monitoring methods are based on previous monitoring efforts of the haul out at Goat Rock State Beach. So the Jenner haul out, as many of you know, has been very extensively monitored. First by the Seal Watch program that Stewards continues to operate. But then also by a local researcher, Dr. Joe Mortensen, who was a longtime a researcher of pinnipeds and specifically the Jenner haul-out, and then a former resident of Jenner, Eleanor Toohey. I don't know if some of you may know have known Eleanor. She lived in the community of Jenner in one of the homes right at the end of this town. And she used to go out every day and take a photograph of the mouth of the Russian River and the Jenner haul out and account of the harbor seals. It represents a really long standing data set um, for the Jenner haul out. And then I mentioned previously, Sonoma Water did a monitoring study of the Jenner haul out from 1996 to 2000, associated with the artificial breaching program at that time. And those studies were led by Joe Mortensen and Sonoma Water staff. So those were all opportunities to really kind of develop our monitoring methods for the Jenner haul out specifically. And the goals and objectives that for the monitoring program that are outlined are to monitor the response of pinnipeds to estuary management activities that occur on the beach, um, and then also to monitor the trends in the haul out's population size and pup production at the Jenner haul out, and report these results to resource agencies and to the public so that we can have an informed understanding of how the harbor seals specifically that utilize the Jenner haul out, but pinnipeds in general might be impacted by activities that occur at the estuary. So the pinniped monitoring program schedule, what we call baseline studies, occur from mid-March to mid-October every year. And these are just ongoing studies to understand how the harbor seal haul out is being utilized. Um, and then we also do monitoring around specific activities that occur at or near the haul out. So implementation and maintenance of any artificial breaching activities that occur either with lagoon management or just irregular artificial breaching activities year round. So now I'll talk a little bit about baseline monitoring methods. So the baseline monitoring occurs at Goat Rock State Beach in Jenner. We're really looking at the Jenner haul out. So that is the haul out that occurs kind of north of a concrete jetty groin at Goat Rock State Beach, all the way up to um, sort of the upper extent of the beach cliffs there where the river mouth migrates. And we do 2 surveys a month from mid-March to mid-October. They're each 4 hours long, and the surveys are generally shared between Stewards volunteers and Sonoma Water staff biologists. During the harbor seal pupping season, we will do these surveys on a weekly basis, primarily in April and May, so that we can keep an eye on how the pupping season progresses. And then the monitoring methods include both total counts of seals on the beach and monitoring disturbances to the haul out. The beach management monitoring, so these are the monitoring activities associated with artificial breaching or lagoon management, have employ the same methods for seal counts and disturbances as our baseline methods. They include a 1 day sort of pre-excavation survey that occurs within 1 to 3 days prior to doing any beach management activities. Also monitoring the day of beach management activities, and then a post-monitoring the day after. And during the pupping season from mid-March to the end of June, we have specific monitoring activities and avoidance measures for if there are neonates on the beach. And Andy will talk specifically about how to identify harbor seal neonates. But basically, a neonate is any pup that's less than a week old. And if there are neonates present in the area where we might have to go out and do an artificial breaching activity or lagoon management activity, um, work in that area is delayed until the pup has left, or the latest possible day to avoid actually flooding. Um, and then still being able to maintain a suitable rearing habitat for listed salmonid species. So unless flooding is imminent, um, we don't do any beach management activity during that time. And then they can't beach management activities can't occur on more than 2 consecutive days. And then we have a 7-day no work period between events. We are required to report if our monitors observe any abandoned pups at the haul out. So, ways to look for signs of abandoned pups, and Andy will talk about this more as well, is we look for pups that clearly are not having any contact with adults. They haven't really moved on the beach. Their attempts to nurse from a female are rebuffed. Um, we are not allowed to handle any marine mammals or their pups. So we don't have permission to approach or move pups from the beach. If monitors do observe what they think might be an abandoned pup, we need them to report that to Sonoma Water staff. All of our contact information are included in the data sheets that are given to all the volunteers. And we report that immediately to National Marine Fisheries Service Stranding Network, um, to the Marine Mammal Center, and then we also report that to National Marine Fisheries Service regional and headquarter offices within 48 hours. But we report them to the Stranding Network as soon as possible. Um, and they don't always respond to reports of abandoned pups. I will just mention that for everyone's understanding. Um, and they also have permits for rescuing pups, and they have to work within those permits. So sometimes they're not allowed to actually go into a harbor still haul out um, to rescue a pup. So they'll have to review each situation case by case to determine if they're able to rescue that pup. And then what do we do with the data that all of the volunteers and staff biologists collect? So all the data sheets that include the seal counts and the disturbances are reviewed and entered into a very broad database at least once per month. And then we evaluate the data for trends that may meet the goals and objectives of the Pinniped monitoring plan. We prepare an annual report that we are then submitting to the National Marine Fisheries Service. We share with state parks and stewards of the coast and redwoods, and we share with the public as well. And Andy will be presenting some of the annual results in her upcoming presentation. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions about the monitoring program. And Andy will talk a lot more about monitoring methods, how to identify pinnipeds, and our protocols in her upcoming presentation. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to
I,
Andy. Thank
I
you
had a
all.
quick question, Jessica, and this might be for
Yeah.
Lisa. This is Melanie. When do we think the sign-up sheets are going to come out for the upcoming monitoring season? Or have they already gone out and I missed them?
They haven't gone out yet. They will go out sometime within a week after this training. Thanks for asking.
Awesome. Can you tell I'm excited to get signed up?
You can. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Jessica, for providing all that detailed background information and explaining the permit process and permit regulations. I'm going to focus specifically on kind of the steward's role in executing our monitoring plan, starting with some Pinniped ID and then discussing our monitoring protocols and some specifics related to that. Let me get my slide set up here. That doesn't work for me. Okay. Yeah, so let's get started with some identification of the pinnipeds in Northern California. There we go. So pinnipeds are in a family of marine mammals that include true seals or faucid seals and eared seals, which would be sea lions or fur seals. And we have 4 species of the odorhyoid seals and 2 species of the true seals that we can find potentially at Jenner. Harbor seals are the main player here. That's the large group of pinnipeds that you'll see hauled out in the Jenner haul out. So our pinniped monitoring is really focused on the harbor seal population that use Jenner as a rookery, which is another way of saying like a breeding ground. So females return to this beach. They were likely born there themselves. They often return to their natal or their where they were born to give birth to their pups. And then they also breed in the same area. So you can identify these harbor seals by their body shape, their streamlined torpedo-shaped body. Males and females are about the same size, which is unlike a lot of the other, well, any of the other pinnipeds you would see in the area, and is a more common characteristic to like a polar inhabiting seal. They do not have external ear flaps. They aren't able to like rotate up onto their hips, so they're always kind of like laying on their bellies on the beach. They can come in 2 different color phases. So you might see dark seals with light spots or silvery spots, or silver or light whitish colored seals with dark spots. And during the late summer period of the year, it's kind of hard to see either of those characteristics because their fur is old and it gets kind of brown and worn, and they all look kind of sandy colored, and their spots are less defined, but they will regrow their fur every year and then look shiny and new again. These individuals are not considered to be migratory, although they do, leave their haul out area to go foraging, and they may be gone from the beach for a couple days at a time or longer, but they tend to return to the same resting areas. And the last time they did a survey that we have results from, the California population was estimated to be just over 30,000 individuals. Last summer, they did do another census in California for the harbor seal population. We don't have the results of that yet, but it will be interesting to see in over 10 years what kind of trend they've seen statewide in population growth. So while harbor seals are kind of the main pinniped that we're observing at Jenner, there is potential for other pinnipeds to be there. 2 of those species are actually included under our permit, which means if they're found on the beach, we can still follow our permit guidelines and continue with our beach activities or our biological or estuary monitoring activities. Another one of these species is the northern elephant seal. If you've been to Año Nuevo or down near Hearst Castle, like there's large populations of elephant seals that breed on the beach there. They're also on the Farallon Islands and the Channel Islands, and up north as well, the north coast of California. So the individuals, oh, and obviously Point Reyes, sorry, I forgot to mention them. So those are places where you can see large colonies of northern elephant seals, but we typically, if we see them on the beach, we're seeing younger individuals that are solitary. Um, so they are a very distinguished looking seal. The adult males are quite huge, weighing up to 2 tons. They have a predominant proboscis, or like an enlarged nose, that they use for vocalizations. They're very sexually dimorphic, meaning that the males are much bigger than the females. They have black whiskers and black eyes. But they're similar to the harbor seals. They don't like rotate on their hips. So they are true seal, no external ear flaps. One thing that's an easy way to distinguish them on the beach is behavior of flipping sand onto their back. They do that for thermoregulation, and harbor seals don't do that. So if you see kind of a large-ish looking harbor seal and it's flipping sand on its back, it's probably an elephant seal. So that would be an indication to take a closer look. We don't always see them every year, but it's pretty common. So to have a sighting of a subadult elephant seal on the beach every year, every other year. Their population extends from Baja up to Alaska, but the California population was last estimated to be just under 200,000 individuals based on a 2013 count. So here's some comparisons that can help distinguish elephant seal, a young elephant seal, from an adult harbor seal. We can kind of see from these sketches a size comparison. On the right-hand side, you see like relative size between an adult male harbor seal and adult male elephant seal. However, looking at the picture on the left, that's the top left is a sub-adult harbor seal, northern elephant seal flipping sand on its back. So pretty similar in size to an adult harbor seal. So it is something to look out for. And they will, they'll sneak into the haul out. So they actually will rest next to the harbor seals. So when they are on the beach, you might not notice them as being different right away, but on closer inspection. And then a close-up of their face that's provided below kind of shows they have really, really dark black eyes, which is unique, a broad, flat nose, and black whiskers. Their hind flippers are also more lobed on the outside margins compared to a harbor seal, which are pretty uniform across the flipper. So moving on to our odorides, or our eared seals that we might see here. California sea lions are the animals that you hear before you see them. So they're the ones that are barking. You've seen them down in San Francisco. Typically, when they're in the area, they stay in the water. We less frequently see California sea lions hauled out on the beach at Jenner, although they do occur. And they will come up to rest, but they're often seen in the area as they're migrating from the northern waters in Alaska down to their breeding grounds on the Channel Islands in Southern California. So the males will make these migrations every year, south and then back north again, whereas the females and the juveniles will stay in the waters near the Channel Islands. So when we do see younger individuals or females in our area, it's usually related to a stranding event or an indication that there's something kind of disrupting the normal population's behavior. So sometimes when we see juveniles on the beach, they're often not in the best condition. And then we let the Marine Mammal Center know. That's another thing that we would notify them on. So these California sea lions, they can kind of rotate their hips so they have an upright posture when they're resting. Sometimes they have a pointy dog-like snout. They have ear flaps that you can see. Like I said, you usually will hear them, and that's an indication that you're looking at a sea lion because they're barking. Here's some pictures that help kind of distinguish them from harbor seals and are representative of what we would see here. So starting on the left, there is a younger sea lion, hanging out with the harbor seals. They tend not to rest right near each other. Usually when you see a sea lion, they're separate from the harbor seals. My guess is this one didn't stay on the beach too much longer after that photo was taken. On the bottom right, you can see a group of adult male sea lions swimming in the water. And above them is a group of juvenile sea lions resting in the estuary. So sometimes we do see groups of younger individuals when there's been kind of like an issue with foraging, and they can often be undernourished when we see them up here. But when the young ones come up in those big clumps like that. Okay. So here's just another side-by-side comparisons between sea lions and harbor seals when they're in the water. Sea lions will often make like a wake, or anyway, they're much showier. They splash around a lot more. Harbor seals will tend to just like pop their little head up and bob up in the water. So those are some things to look for. There's another species of stellar sea lion. It's closely related to the California sea lion. It's also an odoriid. There are some breeding populations that are newer in the northern part of the California coast, north of us, and closer to the Oregon border. Their populations have been growing in California, but their population is considered for all of the Eastern Pacific, which would include California up through Southeast Alaska, is just under 100,000 individuals, which is larger than it was from the last count. These animals are larger than a California sea lion. They have a big barrel chest. Their coat tends to be golden instead of brown. I would say they look more bear-like than dog-like. If you were looking at their face, it's a squattier nose. I have not heard of any observations of stellar sea lions on the beach at Jenner, but there are individuals known to occur just north near Fort Ross, and also on the Farallon Islands and down further south at Año Nuevo. There's two species of fur seals that could occur. Again, these are not individuals who would utilize the beach for breeding purposes in our area, but they might come ashore to rest. The northern fur seal does have a breeding population on the Farallon Islands, which isn't very far from us. And they have a very pelagic lifestyle, meaning they spend a lot of time out at sea without coming to shore to rest at all. So they can come to rest kind of at like random places along the coast for brief periods of time, so that it is possible that we would see an individual on the beach in that situation. They are most readily identified by their pointy nose and their really, really long flippers. They have comically long fore flippers and hind flippers, and they'll often kind of wave them around. Their fur is much darker, much more luxurious than either the Steller sea lion or the California sea lion. They are an otariid or an eared seal, so they have the ear flaps and they can sit upright. You'll also, another characteristic that helps identify them from a California sea lion is that the fur on their fore flipper has a straight line across the wrist joint, whereas a California sea lion, the fur would come down to a point there. A rare animal to see here would be the Guadalupe fur seal. Looks very similar to a northern fur seal, but it does have a longer kind of pointier snout. They could be confused with a young California sea lion. When they have been observed along our coast, it's been associated with an unusual mortality event. So they were kind of out of place. Really, they breed off the west coast of Baja, and they're just like a handful of individuals who have started breeding in the Channel Islands down south. So I know I just said you could tell them apart from, or the other fur seal, the northern fur seal, apart from a California sea lion by the fur on its flipper. Well, this Guadalupe fur seal also has the extended fur down past the wrist. So it's really just the northern fur seal that has it straight across. So those are it's a summary of the species that could occur in our area. So we do provide guidance in the packets along with the data sheets that help, that have different sketches and photographs of the different species to help with identification. And there's also resources on the Stewards Google Drive that's shared with the Pinniped monitors, and I possibly on the website, but I can't say that for sure. So I'll have to follow up with that on that. But when in doubt, take a photo. These are photographs taken through the spotting scope with just a point and shoot camera. So you can kind of hold it up to the eyepiece and take a photo, because oftentimes the zoom on the camera itself isn't enough. But this is just kind of hard to identify here as to what it is, because you can't see any flippers or any face or any distinguishing features, but it is California sea lion in kind of not great shape. So it's pretty skinny compared to what it should be. And then this photo here on the right is a northern elephant seal, a young individual up here. And it's a little harder to see, but it had been flipping sand. So the sand all around it is disturbed. But it's similar in size to these adult harbor seals, so they can be the trickiest ones, I think, out there. Harbor seal pupping is going to start soon, and so being able to identify and age pups is an important part of the monitoring during the spring months. We usually start seeing them in March, and that varies a little bit from year to year. The pups will stay with their moms for about a month, but they're very precocial. So they're able to swim right away after birth. And so that means that they might be left on the beach. Also from their moms going on little foraging trips before they're weaned. Let's see. We do need to distinguish two different ages for the pups. One is an A neonate that Jessica mentioned is any pup that's less than 7 days of age. And then we consider a pup older than that, so greater than 7 days, but still with its like hasn't been weaned yet. We would call a pup. So it's a short period of time for both of those age classes. So they like quickly age out of either of those categories. So how do we tell a neonate from a pup? So neonates just been born. They're really awkward in their movements and they haven't put on any kind of body fat yet, really. So you can see wrinkles around their hips and abdomen. You can often see their umbilicus still, that's sticking out there. So that from the umbilical cord, that falls off around the 7-day mark. So, and their movements are just not as fluid. They don't have as much strength. Whereas once a pup kind of passes that mark and is over a week old, they put on weight very quickly. They fill out. You can't see their hip bones anymore. They don't have little wrinkly spots around their abdomen. And they move, they have more strength and more coordination in their movement, but they're still associated with a female. So when sometimes you need to observe them, for a period of time, like keep your eye on them for about 10, 15 minutes, and then you'll see them interacting with other seals. And then it'll be obvious that they're with their mom because they're feeding machines at this point and they're just trying to nurse all the time, which is how they can put on that weight so quickly. Let's see. So first, I'm going to have a little quiz here, but I want to see if there are any questions about any of the ID characteristics that I went over. Okay. I know it's a lot of information, so there are resources out there for sure, but I'm hoping we can have a little quiz here. So we talked about different characteristics for pups and neonates. So there's 4 different photos here. And I want to see if anybody's brave enough to guess the age of the pups in the photos. So starting with A, we have 3 seals. One's a pup. Do we have any takers on who would, if that's a pup or a neonate?
I think it's a neonate.
Yes. And that was Lauren?
Yes.
Okay, what gave you that?
It's just so tiny
Right?
and very, very furry.
Yes. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. So they aren't always this furry, but because they often shed this furry white coat in utero. It's called lanugo, but sometimes they don't. And so this one looks like it didn't shed that. And so it's brand spanking new. Good job. Okay, what about B? Who do we have there? 2 adults, pup and adult, neonate and adult. Oh, I see some in the chat here. Let's see. Pup and adult and B, pup and adult. Yep. Okay. Yeah. So here's our adult. Here's our pup. When you see perpendicular orientation like that is very common because they just want to feed all the time. So they're going to be nose up to the belly pretty much. One thing that I like to point out here is that this individual has that brown coat. So this coat is almost a year old, and this female is going to shed in the next couple months. This is a new seal. So at this time of year, seal that's not a pup shouldn't have a new looking coat. So this coat is less than a month old, but you can see that their size difference isn't that great. So when it gets close to weaning, the pups look about as big as their moms in some cases. They're not quite as long, but they're definitely getting to be as round. So this is an older pup here. Okay. I saw some in the chat. People had other guesses about D. Let's see. Did anybody say anything about C? Okay. What do we think? I have an A and D neonates. Yeah. So D also neonate. You can see wrinkles there along the body. And the main cue here is there's still like kind of a bloody rump on the female. So that pup's actually just hours old. That female hasn't gone for a swim yet. Let's see what else we have in the chat here. C, pup and mom, pup and adult, C, pup and adult. Yeah, okay. So this one, definitely pup and mom. The pup is nursing, but we can't really tell if it's a neonate or not because we can't see the hips. We can't see if there's an umbilicus. It's not moving. So when in doubt, call it a pup. So use the neonate when you have a positive characteristic for a neonate. Like you've seen the umbilicus, it's wrinkly, its movements are awkward. If you know it's a pup, but you can't say that it's a neonate, then you would record it as a pup. So thanks everyone for participating in the quiz. Any questions about any of the pup or neonate ID before I move on? Okay, great. I think it's just my answers here. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to switch gears and go on to my monitoring presentation. So in the next slideshow, I want to, I'm going to review some current monitoring results as well as trends from our whole monitoring program, and then go into some of the details about what it is to monitor and what a monitoring day would look like. I'm not going to give a lot of detailed information about how to fill out the data sheet because we'll do that when we do an in-person. So I just want to give you kind of a taste for what would be expected as a monitor for one of those 4-hour shifts. But it's much easier to explain when you're out there in person and you have seals in front of you and an actual data sheet. Okay. So if there are no questions, I'll move on here. Making sure. Okay. Missing anything?
Wait, Candy, I have a question.
Yeah. Sure.
When is a pup not called a pup?
Great question. We stop recording pups by July 1st because it's too hard to tell. So they can be a pup for that whole year, right? Like they're still a young of the year, but they've been weaned. And so we don't really know if they're a year old or 2 months old because they're about the same size. In that first year, they don't grow much. They'll actually lose weight after they're weaned. And then once they kind of start losing weight, and then the like year and 2-month-old seals, they're about the same size and they're hanging out together and they're not with the adults anymore. So after the end of June, we don't try to classify them. So we're just trying to get to those very firstborn pups. Yeah. Great question. Okay. Okay. So going through some monitoring here. Yeah, so like Jessica and Lisa gave context for how long we've been engaged with stewards and community volunteers to do this citizen science. So that's almost 1,300 surveys so far. So for definitely over 5,000 hours of surveying out there. So we have trained a lot of experts in harbor seals at Jenner. Many hours of community engagement and up to 50 volunteers that we've interacted with and connected with over this time. And it's really a privilege to be able to provide these annual training opportunities and to get new people interested and engaged in the program. Just to provide some context here, these are my kids. This one's in college now. The littlest here, now my pointer. Yeah, she's in college now. She's a sophomore in high school. So we've been at this a bit. And I've tried to share my love of the harbor seals and the estuary out at Jenner with them. Okay, seasonal patterns. So this is our monthly counts of harbor seals from last year. You'll notice that our year is kind of starting here in March and ending in October because that's when we conduct our baseline surveys. And we see numbers increasing in the springtime and then again in July, and then really kind of dropping off here in October. This follows their behavioral patterns throughout the year. So we have pupping starting here in March. Females are coming to shore. They're going to be spending more time on the beach and in the nearshore environment up through May. We start weaning in June. There's also females will breed after they wean their pups, and they breed in the water. So you'll have males coming in the area. They defend roughly, it's these underwater territories where they display. It's not like defending a resource territory, but they vocalize and display to the females. So they're still around. Everybody's spending a little less time on land at this point. In July, they start their molt. It goes through August. It varies from year to year. And it's believed that spending more time on land and using like the sun to warm you up speeds the process of turning over that coat. So, and growing the new fur. And after all of that work, everybody's pretty hungry. So this decline that we see is not necessarily like an indication that they've migrated or they've left the area or they don't use the beach. It's that they're using it less time. So they're spending more time off the beach, in the water, foraging for food in the nearshore environment, and less time resting on shore. And we've noticed that pattern through many years. So this is just a plot that shows 10 years of seasonal trends, and it includes the period from January to December. So this decline that we see in the fall is very predictable, whereas we see a lot more variation year to year in the other months.
Why was there the increase on the one in December, do you think? The blue line?
This blue line, yeah, in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is interesting. We
Mm-hmm.
had fewer, I'm trying to think back.
Not to put you on the spot, but it's an interesting,
Yeah,
different trend.
yeah, it is a different trend. I know I tried to
Yeah.
figure out what was behind it at the time, and I'm not sure I came to any kind of real conclusive. But let
No
me get back to
blobs
you
or
with that,
anything, or
Melanie.
you know.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
got it.
I know I've written about it somewhere,
Yeah.
but I don't have it on the top of my head. But
No
I will get
worries.
back to you. I promise. Okay. Yeah. So let's see. But I will say this isn't the only year that they observed a higher abundance in winter.
Okay.
Because earlier on, when Joe Mortensen, in some of his monitoring, like starting in the early 90s, also had a trend of higher abundance in the winter time.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, but it seems to have trended more recently toward this increase in the summer months. Although I will say that when we do have it can change quite a bit based on other environmental conditions, including how many days during these months the river mouth is closed, because that tends to depress seal abundance on the beach. And they tend to show a preference for hauling out when there is a wide open river mouth.
Thank you.
Sure. So in our long-term data set, we have analyzed big chunks of data, and we found that there are a few primary factors that influence seal abundance on land. And this is similar to what they found in other areas in different harbor seal populations. And one of them is time of day. So just to orient you to these plots, the dots are just numbers of harbor seals on land over time. And so we have hour on the x-axis and number of seals on the y-axis. And I have it split by season because I wanted to point out that, like, overall, we talked about in the fall, there are fewer seals on land. In the summer, there are more. And then spring and winter are more variable. So what we see is in the spring and the winter, there tends to be an increase in seals as the day goes on. So the haul out will start smaller in the morning, and as we count through the day, the numbers increase. And this pattern is consistent in the spring and the winter months, but not fall and the summer. In the fall, seals are just not using the beach as much, and so they don't have that diurnal pattern. They're probably away from the beach foraging for longer periods of time. And in the summer, they're spending more time on the beach and not leaving as much, so that there's not that diurnal pattern. Whereas in the spring and winter, it indicates that they could be making daily or nightly foraging migrations. And their work in other places have found that a lot of prey that's commonly found in their diets include fish that migrate in the water column, and they migrate up to the top of the water column at nighttime. And it's just another indication that they may have or at least some portion of the animals on the haul out may have a preference for feeding at night. And so we see them returning from these foraging trips throughout the day to rest. Okay. Another factor that has some influence on seal abundance is tide height. So again, the dots are numbers of harbor seals. Tide height is on the x-axis here. Only at the very highest tides do we see a significant reduction in the number of seals. So the haul out is available at all tides, but at a higher tide, you tend to get a lot more wave overwash, and that moves seals off of the haul out. Yeah, let's see. Another one is river mouth condition. So we have seen consistently over time that there are fewer seals when the river mouth is closed compared to when the river mouth is open. Part of this could be confounded by the fact that the river mouth is more frequently closed in the fall period, when seals are also less likely to spend more time ashore. So there is some kind of overlap in those two conditions there. But even outside of that fall period, like in the summer months, compared to an open or closed condition in June or July, we would see fewer seals typically when the river mouth is closed. And that's not necessarily linked to anything that's happening on the beach. I've tried looking at like number of people or increase in disturbances. It seems to be more of a preference for proximity to a navigable waterway, as opposed to having to move your body physically over the beach to get from one to the estuary to the ocean. So some trends in abundance that we've seen over time here. So this is 14 years of data. The bars are the average numbers of seals on land just during that peak season. So this is just for the months of June and July. So I'm trying to control for season here. The bar, the black line across the top is the 13-year average of seals. And so we can see that last year there were fewer seals during the June and July months compared to pretty much all previous years, and almost half of what we would consider the average. This seems to be related to the amount of days that the river mouth was closed during this time. Yeah. Because we did see some reduction in pup production for that year, but not as much as you would expect if there just like weren't seals using the beach at all. So these are the number of pups produced each year based on our best estimates, which is hard to do with seal pups. But so this number of 35 or so from last year isn't that different from most previous years. We did have quite a bit more counted the year before. Harbor seal pups, it's hard to get a census count because they are precocial. Unlike other pinniped species, we can't just count all pups on land because they're not going to be on land at the same time, which is why we work to go out there every week during those April and May so that we can count like all of the neonates and add that number up to get to a good pup count. We also had some difficulty with getting all of the surveys completed. So that could also be a result of not conducting as many counts as the previous year. So it's hard to say based on that alone if it really represents like fewer seals on the beach. We've also looked at trends in disturbance. So this like what types of things disturb harbor seals, and is that changing? And does that change with mouth condition or time of year or time of day? So these gray bars are just the maximum count of seals on land in a given day, just to kind of show you. And then I'm going to overlay that with the number of seals that were disturbed to kind of give you a sense of like, of all the seals that were on the beach that day, how many of them were disturbed. So people, this makes sense. This is the most common source of disturbance for the harbor seals. It's a state beach. People go out to the beach. They walk up to the seals because they want to see the seals, and the seals might move off the hollow because people get too close. The next source of disturbance that we most frequently see are people in kayaks. So it's just very popular to go out kayak. You can get close to the harbor seals that way. But when you get too close for comfort, the seals might leave the beach. So this kind of shows the blue dots now are the instances of kayaks disturbing seals. And then the third most common is actually birds. So they share the haul out as a resting area for different species of birds. Sometimes the birds fly right into the haul out, and harbor seals don't like that. So they tend to leave the beach when that happens, if they get too close. Other sources might include other boats, aircraft, and occasionally dogs. We don't have a lot of interaction with dogs on the beach, but when they do, the harbor seals tend not to like to share that space with dogs. We mentioned Jessica in the description of the monitoring we do and also the estuary management activities. You know, we're monitoring our disturbance and what that looks like for the harbor seals when we do those activities. So we expect to disturb harbor seals that are on the beach when we do these activities. It happens less than 100% of the time because there aren't always harbor seals on the beach when we do a beach management activity. And sometimes they're just far enough away from the action that it doesn't disturb them. And we do see kind of some trends in the numbers of seals on land that before a breaching event or a lagoon outlet implementation, there are fewer seals on the beach compared to after. And this, I believe, is related to their preference for an open river mouth condition. So under these surveys, the river mouth is closed, which is why we're doing the activity. And then on the post breaching or post lagoon outlet, it's open again. So we do see that consistently. Okay, so I'm going to quickly go through kind of a monitoring activity. Are there any questions before I do that? Okay, so we mentioned before that each shift is 4 hours. We have, we're trying to get out there every week during the pupping season. Aside from that, it's 2 days a month. We do them during weekdays because that's the most consistent for our data set. And weekend conditions might be different with increased visitor activity on the beach. So we're trying to get like baseline information. So that's why we do it during the weekdays. And we like to start at 8 o'clock and end by 4 o'clock. And, that's pretty consistent. So a 4-hour block within that time frame. This is the data sheet for our counts. We record some general information in the beginning about the day, about what the survey is about, and that's what these are for. So kind of who you are, what day is it, what you're doing the observation for, when did you start and end, is the river mouth open or closed? So these are all kind of these are factors that we're looking at to see if they're, the open or closed and the conditions on the beach, like the air temperature and the precipitation, like if it's rainy or foggy, that's helping us understand how easy it was for you to make observations. Can't see through the fog that well. Was it windy? Those kind of things. So we get that information in the beginning, and then the next thing we want to know is who's on the beach. So I like to just take binoculars and scan everything I can see on the beach from the overlook. I want to make sure I'm not missing any California sea lions or elephant seals that are kind of off to the side. And harbor seals are often hauled out in multiple groups. So get a sense for how many groups there are. And then I start by drawing a map. I like to just sketch kind of what the river mouth is and where the groups of seals are. If there's anything kind of noteworthy, I would add it to the map. We like to include the position of the jetty. You don't have to be an artist to do this. So jetty structure, this is Haystack Rock there. It's just what I can see from the overlook. And then you start with your counts. Let's see, oh, no, we're doing environmental conditions. So we have a thermometer and a wind meter out there. Then, so we might have start time be a little different from when we start our first count, which is fine because you're doing some things, when you first get set up before you maybe conduct your first count. Depending on how many groups, breaking it up by site is really for the ease of the observer because it can be easier to count a group of 50 seals rather than try to keep a number of like multiple groups all in your head. We're recording the seals based on age, and we have these kind of very broad categories. Like there's pups, and there's 2 types of pups, either a neonate or a pup greater than 7 days old. And then not pups. So we don't really know how old they are after that. So we call them all not pups, essentially. And then, right, so we mentioned that just during these periods, March through the end of June, are we using this pup category? Outside of these months, all harbor seals are going to be recorded in this non-pup category. If there are other species out there, what's the species? can you tell if it's a male or a female California sea lion? Or you should be able to tell if it's an adult California sea lion, they're going to have a big top knot on their head and just like big barrel chest. Maybe you can't tell, that's fine, but try to identify it to species and how many. And we're only recording the numbers of those animals on land. If you see a California sea lion in the water or hear it in the water, you can add that to the comment, because this is all just for animals on land. And then it goes for harbor seals too. So you don't need to count harbor seals swimming in the water, just harbor seals on the beach. And then for every pinniped in this site that you're recording, you would add the total and record the total there. And then we like to keep track of how many people are there at the same time. And so you're really looking at people kind of closer to that haul out. So about, where the jetty structure starts in the beach on the estuary side and north of that, because there can be people way down by the parking lot and you don't need to count them. So just another review of the neonate ID, so pups have to be with a female. It could be nursing, could be nuzzling, could be vocalizing. Once they're weaned, we don't need to record them as pups, and they tend to be in groups of other young seals rather than with adults. Neonate, definitely going to be with a female here, but you can see an umbilicus there, wrinkly body, awkward movement, thin at the hips and waist. Take photos. We ask people to, we provide a camera and you take a digital photo. We're just kind of mostly like where the harbor seals are on the beach. But you can use them if you have questions, if you're concerned about something, if we can use it as a resource. So it's digital, so don't be shy. Go ahead and take photos. We also record disturbances. So you're going to be out there for 4 hours. You conduct a count every 30 minutes. In between that time, when you're not conducting a count, you're watching through the binoculars, through the scope, and you're looking to see if the seals are disturbed. And that could be they just lift their head and look up toward a person or a boat or a bird or whatever. It could be that they move from where they were resting to just like they scooch a little bit, or they could flush into the estuary or the ocean, right? So they leave the beach to go into the water because something disturbed them. So those are the categories of response. And we're just going to tally how often that happens based on the source. So for each source, if it causes one of these responses, you would put a tick mark, a tally. You might need to fill out more than one sheet based on who's on the beach, because we want to record the like non-pup disturbance and the pup disturbance separately. We also need to know if other species are disturbed, like California sea lions, northern elephant seals. So you would just use a new sheet for that. So we're circling who we're looking at here. So these are harbor seal adults. People on the beach cause seals to alert. Then, right, maybe that person or people, they got closer and now seals flushed. This is a way to keep track of what the sources of disturbance are and how frequently they're occurring without having to count the individual seals that are being disturbed. So we're just using this as a metric of like frequency of these interactions and kind of the level of response. And it's nice to put a comment to kind of help set the scene and help understand what was happening. Some could just be self-explanatory, like vehicle noise, a semi from the overlook can sometimes disturb the seals down on the beach. Then you would just keep the tally for all your harbor seal adults for the whole monitoring day on one sheet. And you just, if there's different, things that come up, you would just kind of add that to it, right? So maybe it's no longer that photographer, but like a different group of people came up, but then the seals responded. You would just keep adding to that same tally of people on the beach. Okay. I would like to, no, never mind. Okay. Reporting injured pinnipeds. So part of our requirement is to report any injuries or strandings that we see. And it doesn't have to be related to any human interaction or Sonoma Water activity necessarily. So you're recording these also when you're doing baseline counts. And we send them off, right? And it's up. And if it's a live stranded animal, we would contact the Marine Mammal Center and give them the pertinent information. So a good description of where they are on the beach and what is around them is really helpful to the staff at the Marine Mammal Center in sending someone out to assess the scene, assess the situation, and see if they're going to have any kind of intervention effect. As Jessica mentioned, they also have limitations on how much they can disturb seals and other animals on the haul out. So we want to provide as much information as we can. And there are different levels of injuries, and not all of them need to be reported. So I put some photographs here. So this I would report as a bite. That looks like a shark bite to me. They use this kind of data as a resource to monitor like what's going on generally. So that could be, really useful information for someone studying sharks, for example. So I would include a photo, a description. The animal's not stranded, isn't going to require intervention, but it's useful information for the resource agencies. Some things that you might see commonly are little scrapes and scratches, especially around the face, especially around breeding season, or little nail beds that have a little bloody stuff. That I wouldn't report. That's interaction between harbor seals, and it's not necessarily something that's threatening their well-being. But if you're uncertain, take a photograph, fill out the form, and we can certainly pass that information along. So monitoring schedule, mentioned it was 4 hours that we do it during the week, during these daylight hours. So during our season from March to October, we're doing 2 days a month, and that's shared between Sonoma Water staff and Stewards volunteers. During the pupping season, we increase that. So that's April and May. We're going to get out there once a week, but the monitoring is the same. So it just means there's more opportunity to be out there during the most fun time when you get to see the pups. And then there's also monitoring associated with beach management. These are scheduled as needed. When we're going to have a beach management activity in the event that the mouth is closed and we need to do some kind of beach management, like breaching. So we would ask for volunteers to help with that monitoring, mostly in the day before survey and the post, the day after survey. You conduct the survey just like you would a baseline survey, but these are scheduled as needed, and they often we don't have that much notice. So they're often scheduled with shorter notice. So we just kind of send a request hey, if anyone's available. So any questions about that? So we do have an in-person
Oh,
training.
sorry.
Oh, sorry. Go.
I do have a
Yeah.
question. I'm sorry. It took me a second to get off mute.
No, no, no.
So, as you know, when we get hundreds of seals out there on the beach, it's really hard to do the count because there's so many of them out there.
Yeah.
And, I try to use, we try to get the best estimates we can, and we try and do like multiple counts, to try and validate the numbers that we got. But one thing that I find challenging is like keeping track of where you are in the colony of seals as you're counting them. You're like, oh, wait, did I count that one or did I not count that one? You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So do you have any tricks or that you use to help keep track? I mean, I try to like go almost like in a column, like, okay, here's the seals that are in this column. So I go up and then down and then up and then down and try and get them. So I don't miss them. But do you have any other techniques you use to try and keep track of them all when there's tons of them out there? Or you just kind of have to give it your best shot?
Yeah, I mean, I do have some strategies that I've used. Once it's over, like more than 200 seals in one cluster is a real challenge.
It is.
I like your idea of like trying to identify columns. I try to look for markers. I try to look for like a really light colored seal or a really dark colored seal. Like, okay, I'm going to count up to that point.
Oh, okay.
And then like, so visually is something, hopefully that seal doesn't move before I like get to write that number down and then start again.
Yeah, that's
I also
good.
count by fives.
Oh.
So I just go like 5, 10, 15. So I like visually like separate groups of fives, or you could start by counting by twos. So it just kind of helps you scan that a little quicker. So if you're counting individual seals, it's easier to get lost. So I would start by counting by twos.
Okay.
And then if you feel comfortable with that, I would move up to fives. And then it's really much faster because you're like 5, 10, 15, 20, right? So you're scanning that area.
Yeah.
Quicker. Yeah.
That's so helpful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, there's some margin of error, like do your best. It can be really, really challenging.
Well, and that's what Sherry told us before. Just do our best and try, like, especially when it comes to identifying the neonates too, that can actually get kind of hard too, depending on, sometimes you can't see them because they're like behind the mother, or there's like so many of them stacked in there that you visually just can't see over the top, to get to the behind. Right. And so you just have to kind of give it your best shot.
Yeah. You are kind of guessing at those ones you can only see, like, is that a flipper? Is that a back? Is that a nose?
Yeah.
Right. And then another thing that I will say is that because we're counting every 30 minutes, like we don't expect it to be the same. Yeah. So you may not have seen a seal or a small group of seals or whatever, right, in that count, and then you're going to get them next time. So we use that fact that we have these multiple counts 30 minutes apart, so we can look at a maximum for the day or the average or things like that. So we have a way of kind of working with the data in that regard.
I figured you were doing some level of averaging. Yeah, because you can't go with one singular count unless it's a smaller count. The smaller counts are more accurate, but
yeah, definitely.
The big ones are hard. Okay. Thank you for those extra tips. That was one of the reasons why I came today, was to get some more.
Good.
So thank you.
Yeah, sure. And we'd be happy if you ever want to pop out, or if you want to find out when we have staff scheduled and come and like, I have a question and like, maybe I'm available that day. You can try to meet them in the field and like get that like real hands-on, but I'm always available to like email, text. So, we do have a training coming up on the 5th. We hope to get people out there in person. We're going to meet at the visitor center and then go to the overlook and go through what it is, and get some hands-on experience too.
I appreciate you guys doing that, because I know we've struggled to get like in-person trainings on in the past. So I really appreciate you guys doing that.
Yeah, no problem. And then I put my number here. So I just, to let people know if you want to, jot that down too, if you have questions after the training, or are an existing volunteer and you want to know like how to reach me if you have a question. There you go. So that wraps up what I had. One thing I did forget to mention in my Pinniped ID that I need to, is that, so we have permit for like the harbor seals, northern elephant seals, and California sea lions, meaning we can do activities when they're on the beach. If we see other species that I talked about, stellar sea lions or the fur seals, we should know right away. So if you see something that you think might be one of those species, take a picture, give me a call as soon as you get to where there's reception, I would say, because that would be, we would want to confirm the ID, and then we want to like let other people know that there's a sighting of those, because the Guadalupe fur seal in particular is would be noteworthy to have in the area. So
that's really good to know. Thank you. Because I did see one day. I think it was a stellar, if I remember correctly, and I did note it on the form. But yeah, to let you know, because sometimes too, again, just getting the right ID, was it one? For sure, it looked very unusual.
Yeah.
But yeah, just so that someone can get an accurate, ID on it is helpful too. So thanks for letting us know that.
Yeah, good. And then I would just say, like, I would work with Lisa then if there's like, something comes up that someone reaches out to me individually that I think would be good for the group, to like share that information more broadly and let people know, or clarify something like that. So don't hesitate to reach out in that regard. Okay.
Thank you so much for that great in-depth overview, all of you, both of you. So we're back, and we're going to do a little bit of wrap up here. If you are a current volunteer and you've already filled out all your paperwork and everything like that, you're welcome to stay on. In a minute, we're going to hand it off to Bet and Amelia to talk a little bit about becoming a volunteer and all of that. And so if you have to go, that's great. Otherwise, we'll wrap up in about 10 minutes. So Bet, do you want to introduce yourself? And then
Yes.
last.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lisa. And thank you, Andy and Jessica. Wow, that was a lot of information. Thank you so very much. Again, I'm the volunteer coordinator for the Stewards of the Coast and Redwoods. For those of you that are not volunteers, there's a bit of paperwork that's required, and we try to make this as easy as possible for you. There's a number of ways to accomplish that. First of all, you can go to the Stewards website, stewardscr.org, and under the volunteer tab, you'll find the onboarding package. Frankly, some people find that a bit challenging at best. And so the path of least resistance seems to be to let our wonderful colleague Amelia set this up for electronic completion via DocuSign. And that can be quickly accomplished in a matter of minutes. So that's the easiest way. For those of you that are volunteers and would like to join the Pinniped program, you'll need to sign a duty statement. And that can also be accomplished by going to the Stewards website under the volunteer tab, or again, Amelia can email that over to you for a quick signature via DocuSign. I think that's about it for me. And now our wonderful Amelia.
I think Justin wanted to ask a couple questions to Andy and Jessica, if you want to go ahead and jump in. I'm putting the Pinniped monitoring duty statement in the chat too.
Okay, I think hopefully a couple of quick questions. And I couldn't find the right time to ask, but I wanted to see if you guys know when the data from last summer's flyover for statewide population, when will that come out? And then the other question I had was about the jetty, and if anybody's done any studies so far on impacts of the jetty and or what removing it would do to the river mouth and how that would impact things. One easy one, one tough one.
You want to take the first?
I'll take the easy one.
I'll take the second.
I don't know when the results from the statewide census are going to come out. It often takes like years before they publish an updated population estimate based on that work, because they go through a bunch of statistical analysis and getting all of the, raw data together. But I will let you know if I can find out that information or as soon as I hear anything.
And so there is a study that was completed back in 2017 on the Goat Rock State Beach jetty itself, sort of an evaluation of the jetty and its effects or influence on both when the estuary closes and how it closes, and its effect on water surface elevations in the estuary. So it's very focused on that. But it has a really interesting sort of historic background section that talks about how it was developed. And actually, briefly, it was constructed over many years, beginning, I think, in the 1920s into the 1930s and 40s. It was intended to create an opportunity to keep the river mouth open for navigation. It was actually the materials were actually harvested from Goat Rock itself, and they built the tombola where the lower parking lot is currently. That was constructed, and then the materials are actually there was a roadway and a railroad that was built in the beach, and the remnants still exist in the beach at Goat Rock State Beach, kind of follow all the way out to the concrete cap jetty groin, and extended from there used to be like a wooden pier, so it went extended out into the ocean. So those there are remnants. If you're out on Goat Rock State Beach, you guys have probably seen the railroad tracks or the asphalt, and periodically you'll be able to see the intact redwood walls that are inside the beach, as well as all the concrete and everything that was used to, and rocks that were used to construct the groin itself. So that study, I just put in the link, is on our webpage. I mean, you kind of have to scroll down because it's an older report, but that is linked there. And that was one of the requirements from the Russian River Biological Opinion, is for us to evaluate that. There are some alternatives for ways to modify mostly the groin itself that were evaluated as part of that study. One thing that is, probably underestimated in those alternatives evaluations, especially given the time that has passed, are the costs associated with doing any kind of removal, both from the perspective of doing the engineering designs and planning, but also the physical removal of materials themselves, and then the environmental effects associated with modifying the jetty. That would have a pretty, depending on how it was done and what its outcome would be, it would modify the way the beach sort of functions geomorphically pretty substantially. So
Thank you so much. I was hoping there was a study like this, and I'm stoked, even though it's 300 pages, to read as much as I can.
yeah, there's a lot of technical information in there as well, and there's some appendices as well, because we also evaluated the jetty's influence on seepage through the beach. So we did some groundwater monitoring at the beach and ground penetrating radar studies. So we worked with Lawrence Livermore National Lab on some of that work, as well as our own staff analysis and consultant staff. So some pretty technical information in there, and then some early looks at sea level rise and beach morphology changes with sea level rise as well.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Thank you. Amelia, do you want to say something about paperwork?
Sure. Yeah, that pretty much covered it all. If you already volunteer with another program, then all that's necessary is to sign the duty statement for Pinniped monitoring, and we're happy to help. And I guess I wanted to mention that time spent pinniped monitoring should be entered in the Better Impact database, and I'm happy to help with that too. And if it's easier for you to report to me via email, that works too. I know it's a lot of reporting for this one, so I'm here to help. And yeah, I'll put my email in the chat too.
I'll be sending out a link to the recording to everybody who registered to come. If you didn't register to come to this training and we don't have your information, Amelia and Bet's information in there, so you're welcome to, copy that down and reach out to them. And check our YouTube channel for the video to be posted. And we're really happy to all of you and thankful to all of you for being interested in this. It's a really unique opportunity. And, for me, as someone who I had a dream about becoming a wildlife biologist, and that didn't happen. And I'm very happy with what I am doing. But getting to be up there and doing this kind of monitoring was really wonderful and exciting and interesting. And it does provide opportunities also to interact with the public and share the seals. Many people don't even know that those are seals out on the beach, and it's pretty neat and exciting, and can be very engaging that way as well. And it's sort of the big picture overview that's different from being on the beach for seal watch, as many of you know. Any last thoughts or questions that anyone wants to contribute?
There was one question in the chat that we didn't answer. Michelle asked if there's a protocol for notifying state parks law enforcement if we observe intentional disturbance. Do you want to answer that first, Lisa, or I can?
I think someone else would be better to answer.
Justin?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. Disturbance really isn't something, unfortunately, that's actionable for state parks law enforcement. So, if you're out there monitoring for the Pinniped program, we really want to understand what all those disturbances are, and that's kind of the point of it. Um, there's a difference between, intentional disturbance and harassment. Harassment is something that is actually actionable. So if people are, harassing the pinnipeds or other wildlife, that's something that state parks law enforcement can cite folks for, and I'll try to quickly pull up our call sheet that has disturbance reporting and contact information. Thankfully, with the power of Google, I was able to find it and just put it in the chat. So I think there's a laminated copy of this um, in the materials that folks bring out with them. But if not, it's a great resource to have and to reference related to different types of disturbances, and especially harassment, is when you can call state park dispatch for response.
Thank you. Yeah, the dispatch number is for volunteers to reach any active duty law enforcement for specific kinds of emergencies. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you so much, everyone. And thank you again, Andy and Jessica, for that really great presentation. I know I learned a lot, and I'm really excited for the season and to see everybody out at Jenner on the 5th, if you can make it. If you can't come right at 9:30 and you get to the visitor center and we're not there at the Jenner Visitor Center, you can come up to the Jenner Overlook. We're going to be out there for 4 hours, and because we're doing multiple observations, as you heard, it's fine that if you need to join us a little bit later, because we'll just bring you up to speed as you get there. And certainly anybody who's new to this is welcome to, work with another regular volunteer, connect with Sonoma Water people to learn more. And we will make sure that you get what you need to be able to do the monitoring. Okay. Great. Thank you, everyone, and hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.